Okay, can you hear me? I'm live. Thanks so much for your patience. This is crazy. Let me know if you can hear me. I have gone through a comedy of errors. That's all I can really tell you is that everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong today. And I appreciate you being just an awesome beta tester who is patient and accepting of the fact that not everything works every time. That's how we have to treat these things, because if we didn't, then it'd be easy to freak out. And so I'm just gonna, okay, Jason can hear me. Great. Thanks, Jason. Fred can hear me. Awesome. So let me just, I'm gonna describe to you what happened, because this is the type of stuff that small businesses go through all the time. So over the weekend, I switched my email. I had jeffalytics.com email, and I have Digital Mantis, which is the company that I actually incorporated. Like my S Corp is called Digital Mantis, and Jeffalytics is the name that I used for my blog. And then they sort of just got merged together. Now, the reason why I'm going into this much depth for you is because you probably can understand from our survey here that we're actually sort of looking at, we're talking about the same thing, aren't we? A lot of us have, we just start doing business, we start working, and then suddenly we have a business that we have to attend to. We have different things we need to think about, different considerations, and it's not always smooth how these things happen. Yes, ideally I would have been on the Google suite of apps this entire time and had my email perfectly configured and everything would have been great, but I didn't. I had Jeffalytics, which I started as a blog, and then now I call it my consulting business, and then I have Digital Mantis, which I've had since 2005 or so, whenever I went out on my own. And for the last 10 years, I've been like, do I switch my email or not? And like this, I was like 2017, I'm going to switch the email. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to get everything in one place. And so I did that. I made it so that Jeff at jeffalytics.com and jeff.sauer@digitalmantis.com are the same email. So if you email one or the other, it goes to the same spot. And when I did that, apparently it deleted jeff@jeffalytics.com from the entire Google database. Google had no idea that jeff@jeffalytics.com was a thing. Had no idea. And this is what I use to log into all my clients' Google Analytics accounts. I use it for training. I use it for like everything. And 10 minutes before we were supposed to hop on the call, that email account was no longer existed. And so as you can imagine, my panic was through the roof. And so what I've been doing while you've all been waiting patiently is, one, I tried to change the webinar so I could log in as my Gmail account or my Digital Mantis email account. And it turns out that those things are not allowed to do Hangouts on air, which is really the back end of this thing. And so that didn't work. And so what I had to do is I had to just go and delete the alias jeff@jeffalytics.com from my email and then go back to the old way of doing things. And so if you were to send an email to that address, I'm not sure what would happen right now. So that is the longest explanation I can give you for why this is a crazy world, right? These nagging things that we think we're gonna, we know we should get them done, and it just takes a while because it's not important. There's nobody holding a gun to my head saying, Jeff, you need to make this switch. And so I tend to not do things until I have time to focus, and I finally felt like I had time to focus, and I probably didn't have enough time. And so the reason why I'm telling you this, normally I wouldn't go into this much depth. This is exactly what we're talking about in today's call. This is exactly the point of today's call. And that is, there's so many things that we do from a business planning perspective, or that we don't do because it's not easy to do at the time, or we don't have time to focus, or we're just not sure of what it's going to lead to. And if we don't do these planning pieces, if we don't get that stuff in place, then it could have repercussions down the line. You might find that 10 years later, you're finally fixing something that you should have fixed 10 years ago. That's really the reality of what ends up happening in all of our businesses. And so you saw it happen to me right now. I like to feel like I have my stuff together, but even then there's little things that are nagging there. And this is not uncommon at all. So one of the companies that I Admire is a Minneapolis company called Lead Pages. I know a lot of you have used their software to create landing pages for clients or for your own campaigns. They're still called Avenue 81 because that was the name of the company that they started before they became Lead Pages. So if you send them an email, it's all at their old way of doing email. That's just how companies operate. There's a lot more behind the curtain than you'd think, right? There's the legal business name, and then there's the brand name you use that gets traction. And the reason why I'm even bringing this up and spending this much time again is because as we look at, I'm going to go to our survey results. What are we seeing here? What are we seeing when we look at our results? We actually see stuff about whether you're going to grow or not. We see stuff about, what type of legal entity are you? These are the types of questions we're asking now. So I think it does dovetail nicely into what we're talking about. So let me just make sure that this shows up well on your screen. Let me know if you can see what I have up here. It should just be a type form under Jeff Sauer. I think everybody should be able to see that now. Great. It looks like it's working for everybody. So long story longer, what phase are you in right now in your agency? So one of you is saying that you're a dreamer. 5 of you are in the freelancer phase, and 2 of you are in the employer phase. So as we talked about in our lesson, we defined the dreamer phase as like, hey, I'm looking to make the leap, but I haven't done it yet. Freelancer is you're working, but it's mostly just you or maybe a partner. So you're very small and you're looking to possibly expand, which we can do in the next question. And then the employer phase is really where you have people on your team to get these things done. So this is just really giving you an idea as to where we all stand right now. Do you plan to grow your agency in the future? Yes, all of you do. I think that's sort of a prerequisite, I guess, for investing in this course. If you aren't planning to grow, that would be sort of a weird answer. What type of legal entity have you established? This is one that's sort of interesting. So 5 of you, the majority of you are LLCs, 2 are S corporations, and then 1 is a sole proprietorship. I'd be curious for you LLCs out there. And I know that I think Ryan mentioned it in the forums, how his lawyer said LLC. Lawyers tend to go with LLCs and accountants go with corporations. So I wonder if that's true for all of you as well. So if you are a corporation because your accountant said, let us know, or if you're an LLC because you had a lawyer set it up, let me know in the chat. I'd be curious to see. Ryan says he's in the dreamer phase and the freelancer phase, still works full time, but does freelance just not enough to leave the job. Yeah, the JOB. Yeah, I think as we mentioned, or as I mentioned in the lesson videos, it's okay to be in that phase for a long time, because once you get out of that phase, once you leave the job and you get into this, it's hard to really have to do anything but just work. And so the more plotting you do, the more planning ahead of the time you do, and just sort of mapping out what your vision is going to be while you still can think clearly and you're not in the thick of things and you can have a rational decision process. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So I think it's good, Ryan, to be in that phase and to be in this course at the same time, because again, I sat on the sideline, it seems like forever, but it was really more like 6 months that I was just plotting out what I was going to do. And I even shared that in a lesson, how I mapped out exactly what I thought I would make, what I thought would happen from that. And a lot of you and then I didn't look at it for 10 years, but a lot of the things, everything came true, and actually revenues were much higher than I ever thought they would be. But that was really how it went. Like when you're busy building a brand and building something up, it's really hard to have an objective point of view outside of what's in front of you. Alvaro does an LLC because it seems to be a common choice. Looking back on it, should have done more research, as he'd rather be S Corp. Yeah, I mean, it is common to do an LLC, and LLCs are a safe choice, Alvaro. So there's nothing wrong with doing it. As you can see here, the majority of people have chosen an LLC. So there's nothing wrong with that by any means. There's a tax advantage. I just sent out a massive amount of money to taxes myself for our company. And it was nice to look at that number and see that it was reduced compared to what it would have been if I was an LLC. So that was nice. But that's the main reason why you do it, is tax benefit. And actually at this time of year where we're at right now, some of you would see, if you look at how much you paid in as your own tax on your own revenue, or as you start to file that, it becomes tangible. It's about 6.875% that you're paying extra by being an LLC versus an S Corp. Ryan's saying that he wanted to leave, but he's trading time, but trading work for work. Another plan other than just doing work. So now in the phase of figuring out how you will do the work, so you're not doing work 80 hours. Ryan said that, yeah. My wife's a lawyer and she is an LLC person. So there's nothing wrong with LLCs, but it is a thing that lawyers push, it seems like, as I mentioned in the lesson. So yeah, Ryan, I like your thought on trading work for work, because you're right. And I think we should all think about this, since many of you are freelancers or sort of in this phase where you're getting, early on in the process. If you have a job, and let's just use a round number, if you're making, say, $50,000 a year at your job, you could quit and you could get contracts and you could work the same amount at a contractor rate and you could make $100,000. It's within the realm of possible, but you would basically just be working all the time in order to get to that point and to get there. And so you could get more money, but you'd also have less, you'd have to worry about benefits. You'd have so many things that you have to take care of, that it's all right to sacrifice the short-term earning potential to make sure that what you do is what you're doing is what you want to do, so you can plan it out. So I think that's really a smart attitude with going through things. Okay, so we've talked about this pretty extensively, the legal type of business. How many business partners do you have? So 6 of you are saying it's just you. One has 3 partners and one has 2 partners. I think the 3-partner agency is probably Fred's agency. Do you have strategic partnerships? So many of you are saying no. Some of you are saying yes. I like this thought of strategic partnerships with other agencies. I like it a lot, but I've actually found that it's sort of empty at the same time. So it's all right to have it as a no. I would say some of you can, those of you who say yes, I'd like if you can put in the chat, if you're on the call right now, how it's benefiting you and what the value is. That'd be nice to hear. But here's the thing about that happens. Actually, one of my business partners at 3Deep, here's what he'd always say about partnerships. So people would always come into our office and say, hey, we should work together. This sounds great. And every single time it was empty. Like nobody ever, yeah, we should work together, right? And so Dave, what he would just end up saying to people is, he goes, hey, it's all right for you to come in here. It's cool. We have some energy. The only way that this is going to work out, I've had 50 of these conversations. The only time it ever works out is if you bring business for us or we bring business for you. And we can have a project where we can work on. That's the only time this is going to matter. The only time that a strategic partnership works is if there's money involved. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time. We're just basically putting time into something that may never produce revenue. And so at first I thought it was sort of rude to just tell people that. But then eventually I was just like, man, I respect this a lot, because it is such a waste of time to try to create a relationship without any idea as to whether it's going to work out or not, or not only any idea as if your relationship's going to work out, but there's no real reason to have a relationship with another agency or somebody who throws you business unless it can lead to throwing you business. Now, what I've found is that a lot of people, especially individuals, what they want to do is they want to maintain their independence by being just a freelancer or consultant, whatever you want to call it. And so they try to line up other consultants and be the business development person for them. I've been in many meetings there as well, like, hey, we should all freelancers get together and act like a big agency. And, so, and again, that sounds great in theory. Like I said, I've been listed on people's website as one of the services they provide was like SEO or analytics or web design, even though they didn't do it themselves. They listed me as the partner. I've been involved in all these things. And again, it comes down to business. And the reality is that maybe one of every 50 people that you talk to about partnering up will actually bring stuff to the table. And usually it's the ones who are really good at business development, but not very good at the work. And so if you're an expert in doing the work, then you can get the work done for them. Or it works the other way around, is if you're really good at business development, then yeah, you should be finding partnerships out there where you can give business to people. And I would try to find some kind of structure on it, some kind of revenue structure where you can make money off of it from doing that, anywhere from 10 to 50% of the contract. And so that's really my thought on strategic partnerships, is that they sound great. Like, who wouldn't want to have a partnership where another agency sends you business? But they're pretty empty. It's just lip service, and the nature of working at an agency and having clients and everything, it's hard to do that well. And so I would just say it's all right if you're not doing strategic partnerships. And if you do them, I would focus on doing one or two really well with people who you really trust versus going out and having coffee with people and talking about how do you team up. Never seen those things. I've never seen that really work very well at all. Who makes the important decisions at your company? So many of you are saying that it's you. I think with more data, this would start to even out a little bit, but obviously this is pretty much biased towards the types of agencies you have. Second one, every owner is an equal voice. There's one sole decision maker who's not the person, and then other. It's really hard to come to conclusions from this because so many of you are just one person shops. Nobody has a board of directors. I think that's okay. I think a board of directors probably doesn't become really necessary until you have so many layers that it necessitates itself. And I know that sounds like a weird way of phrasing it, but basically if you have a C-suite and then you have an executive team and you need somebody to govern those areas, then that's when you need a board of directors. If you don't even have a C-suite or you don't even have an executive team and it's just a few of you, probably don't need it yet. And the other thing is, and somebody had asked this in the forums, you are basically the board of directors, even if you don't formalize it as you start your company. Buy-sell agreement, I think, looks like one agency has that. Again, I'm going to assume these no's are based on that it's just one person. These things are really important to take a look at. So hopefully as you grow, you can see how important that is. What are your thoughts? I like this one because it doesn't matter how big your agency is when you answer this one. So for some of you, it's on the back of your mind that you're going to exit your agency, but not influential. And then the other half are saying, basically, I have a ton of work to do if I'm ever going to sell this thing. So you look at it as like a light at the end of the tunnel, perhaps. Actually, I think both of these answers sort of say similar things about you. And so that's good. Honestly, I can't believe that so many of you are saying that you're not planning for an exit. When I first started this thing, when I first started my agency and when I joined the other agency 2 years later, all I thought about was making millions of dollars. So I don't know, either you all are more you're not as crazy motivated as I was to get the money out there, or I've sort of influenced you from this class in that area, or you're just not as young as I was, because I was in my early 20s. But I was like, this is my ticket to millions. That's why I did it. That was the only thing I actually thought about with my agency, was like, I can sell this thing for big bucks. And then it wasn't until like 5 or 6 years later that somebody, my accountant again, was like, you're not worth anything. And so that was a fun reminder for me. So hopefully, whether you were thinking this is going to be a huge way to sell your agency or not, at least now you've heard my cautionary tale about it. So a couple of you are interested in your answers. I'm not sure if we'll get to that or not, but these are the general survey questions. Anybody have any questions on that? Otherwise, I'm going to get into the free form questions. So I'm going to let some questions come in, and then I actually am going to download these results. Because of my technical difficulties, I didn't get a chance to download them. So I'm going to download them right now. See, Ryan popped a link into the chat window. I'm going to take a look at that while I'm waiting for this to download. Oh yeah, yes. I think that was this something that I've definitely seen this before. I can't remember if I sent it out to, if this is in the lesson notes or if it's something I sent to my business partners. But I do remember seeing this. Yes, I think this is something that I included in the notes. But and if anybody is wondering what I'm looking at, it's the Viking mergers piece that Ryan put out there. Alvaro wants to know, yeah, Ryan, it was in the lesson. Alvaro wants to know, would you recommend switching to an S Corp after you reach a certain revenue goal? I am not qualified to recommend a business legal entity to you. I can give you the information that I know, but I can't tell you the involvement between switching between an LLC and an S Corp. It's above my pay grade and my knowledge level and my liability level. I don't actually know what is involved with switching from one to another. So I would love to be able to answer that for you, but you just need to talk to a business professional. And when I say professional, I would probably talk to an accountant and to a lawyer about it, because it affects a few things. Now, it's interesting when you set up an S Corp from scratch. Actually, what probably ends up happening, Alvaro, is that you divest the LLC or shut it down, and then you invest in a new S Corp. And so you close down one business and invest in a new business, essentially. And I had my accountant do the articles of incorporation for my company. Now, your lawyer can do that as well, but my articles of incorporation, which is what a corporation needs, was done by the accountant, and it's pretty straightforward. But it's basically just saying who owns the shares. And since it was just me, it was very easy. And then obviously the agency that I have with multiple owners, that still is pretty straightforward as long as the percentages are well defined of who owns what. But it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, you need to talk to somebody who does this every day, because otherwise you could get burned. I'm just doing my best to try to give you an understanding of the process, but you need to talk to somebody to do that. Brett says, very loosely related, how has running a podcast helped you grow your agency? How beneficial do you feel has been to growing your agency / industry network? Brett, I love that question. So my podcast is not, my objective of the podcast is not to grow agency. It's not to grow clients based on my agency expertise. It's actually it does many things, but it's not for me to get clients doing consulting. The objective is to build the brand of Jeffalytics. It's to talk to peers in the industry and get an excuse to talk to people, a reason to outreach to them and everything. It does a lot for me. But it's not the objective to get clients. Now I know a lot of agencies are thinking about this now. I've actually been on agency podcasts and I've seen them from all over the world, like in the UK and US, Australia. I think that one of the biggest problems that agencies are going to have, and just business to business in general, is like, how do you get enough mass where it's worthwhile to keep on critical mass of people watching or downloading your podcast and listening, that it's worthwhile for you to do this, to keep on producing it. And then who's going to want to listen to an agency talk? Like, what can you talk about that people will listen to it? Because the reality is that I don't the overlap between your clients and the people who listen to podcasts, I'm not sure how big it is. But a lot of times people end up giving up on stuff like podcasting or other dreams. And the reason why they give up on it before they reach critical mass, because it's hard to get a lot of people to get interested in B2B things. Like, B2B marketing is difficult because there's just so many things for people to consider when it comes into it. And so, I guess I didn't articulate that very well. There's just so many considerations when it comes to the authenticity of listening to an agency. Like, do people really want to get their marketing advice from an agency who's trying to sell them on services? Personally, I don't really know. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't listen to an agency podcast. Maybe, I'd try to get my clients to listen to one, something like that. Anyway, so I don't know if a podcast is the best method that I would think of to market an agency, but I have seen some people who are doing it who do well in it. So I think that the best way, in my opinion, a podcast, it will really help position you as an expert in front of the people you want to be an expert in. So what do you want to be an expert on, and how are you going to get in front of the right people? And so that's how I would look at podcasts as a vehicle. So in my case, it let me reach out to people who are punching several weight classes above me, in my opinion, like the Larry Kims, the Rand Fishkins of the world, Marty Weintraub, people who I look up to. And I actually had an excuse to interview them. And I was like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? And a lot of people now consider me to be their peer, which is wild to me. It's just crazy because I never really thought that would ever happen with these people. And so it's been sort of a cool effect. It's done a lot of good things for me, but it has not been primarily a business generator. It's more of like a deal sweetener. Like, it makes the deal sweeter for those who do want to be involved with what I'm doing. So it's a long way of putting it out there, Brett, but I think you can do it. I think a podcast would be a good idea, but I wouldn't choose it as one of like 10 marketing things that I'm doing and then do it not very well. I would say I'm all in on podcasting. That's what I'm doing. And I'm going to be different from everybody else. Notice like the trend. How are you different? That's really, that's what it comes down to. So how are you going to be different than other podcasts, and who are you going to listen to? Who are you speaking to? And why should they care? I took an approach with my podcast because I didn't think anybody was doing what I wanted to hear. And I think that's been beneficial. And so I'm really happy I did it. But I also don't know that if my objective was to grow business, I think it would have been considered a failure by this point. Let's see here. And sorry if I was rambling a little bit there, Brett, but I was trying to open up the spreadsheet answers while I was talking. So I'm not the greatest multitasker. Ryan said he considered starting a podcast focused on business in the home building industry. Several people he could interview, and you think people will be interested in hearing. Yeah, so this is actually, Ryan, that's a great example. So let's talk about a podcast focused on the home building industry. Who would download that in their right mind? And I don't want to sound super negative, but like who would just download a podcast on home building and be like, yeah, this is the home building podcast. Now, my impression of somebody who's in that industry, they're listening to a radio, like classic rock tunes on a radio. I used to work on construction sites, and this is what it was. It was like one radio playing the classic rock station, maybe a country station. And they couldn't put headphones in because they had to be able to hear things. So I don't know if that would really work out well, but maybe if you're talking like construction foremen or something like that, then that's what it is. They're driving between site to site, you know? So that's one consideration. The other thing is the pro for it is that if you can get one contractor to listen to this podcast in their car, they're going to buy everything you sell for the rest of your life. If they like you and they're interested in it and they're getting insights, they're going to be a lifelong customer of yours. So it doesn't take, sometimes it just takes one to validate your entire production cost. Say that your podcast costs $1,000, a month to produce or something like that. You could easily make that money back if with just one person. So you could get there. So, So it depends on who you're geared to, but that's just an example of my thought process when I go through things. Is I just have to like picture the end user of this thing sitting there in their car or whatever they're doing, and then picture a real human being, and that's usually how I figure it out. Yeah, construction company owners. That's so Ryan, when you whittle it down to like just the owners of the company, how many of those are there in the US? How many of those are there in your market? How many are in the demo where they listen to podcasts? I think of somebody who's older then, who might not even listen to a podcast. How do you get in front of them? How do you get them to listen? Or is there another way to get in front of these people? I'm not sure the answer to that. The good thing about a podcast and other distribution networks like blogging and everything is that the cost is so minimal to get going. Like getting a podcast going is it's very cheap, relatively speaking. If it costs more to do a good production, and there's hosting costs and stuff like that, but it's not too bad to get a podcast going. So you could experiment with it. But again, most people give up on things before they get any traction. And the reason why they give up on it before they get traction is because it's hard to get traction. And so I think if a podcast is one of the 10 things that you're doing, like I said earlier, then generally speaking, I don't think that it's going to give you the results you want. But if you say I'm all in on podcasts, then yeah, you'll get there. And you could say this for anything, right? It's not just podcasts. Podcasts are just one thing that happened to be popular right now. I think, Ryan, you might even have better success on Instagram, using Instagram ads or something. I don't know. There's so many different ways you can get out there and get in front of people that you just need to experiment and see what gets a little bit of traction, or what you're sure that it's going to work, and then just go for it. Like if you're sure something's going to work, just go all in on it. Heck yeah or no. I think that's in one of our upcoming lessons. We talk about that if we haven't already. This extra week, because I was gone 2 weeks ago, or I couldn't attend, it's throwing me off as to whether you've listened to the lessons or not. Okay, so Brett does mention a good podcast for you to take a look at and see how they're doing. That's one thing that I like to do, is see who's successful and just try to like reverse engineer what makes them successful. And then also, is their success, and this is something always you should be worried about, or you should be cautious of, everyone listening and everybody who's in this course, is just because somebody sounds successful or looks popular does not mean that they're profitable. I know there's a lot of people who are famous, internet famous, and they are broke. And just because somebody looks like they're doing well does not mean that they have any money at all. And in fact, the more flashy people are with how well they're doing, the more they talk about their numbers and stuff like that, usually the worse off they are, the more they're putting up a facade. So just because somebody seems like they're doing well doesn't mean that they're making any money at all. There's like, I think there's a quote that I really like. It's like, you can't write a check with famous. And I think that's a good way to put it. Now, I don't know anything about these actual individual podcasts that you're talking about. I'm just saying in general is that just because people are popular doesn't mean that they're successful. Okay, so Hirosh is saying from time to time he's offered to partner up with small businesses just starting up. They basically need all kinds of digital marketing, can't afford to pay what we're willing to. What approach would you advise? So would you work for equity in a company instead of taking money? So in one of the lessons, I definitely say, I personally don't work with startups because I just don't think they're going to succeed for the most part. And it's just way more work than I'm willing to put in. And the return is so far down the line that it's really hard to run a profitable business when, it's really difficult to be profitable with your business if you're doing a bunch of spec work. But with that said, if you believe in the entrepreneur, or if you have extra margins in what you do, or if you have cash cows and you have extra time, you might consider doing that, like working for equity. As far as how much equity you should get, one of the calculators we put in our lesson about partnerships, we have a calculator about equity percentages. I believe it's lesson number, I want to say 28. There's a bunch of different ways to look at it. I think, venture capitalists, they say who had the idea, who's committed to it. They basically break it out by how much risk you take and how much you put into it. Then also there's the pillars of what makes a business successful. There's leadership, there's sales and marketing, there's product, there's back office, like finance, HR type stuff. And you got to give some percentage assignment to sales and marketing, like the value that it brings in. I happen to think that marketing and sales is extremely valuable to a business, maybe even worth 50% or more. But if you're just doing it as a freelancer on the side, part-time, it's probably like just a few percentage points that you could ask for. And it probably vests over a long period of time, because if you're just doing work, let's say for 2 months, I don't think that somebody in their right mind would give you a large chunk of their company in the future because you spent 2 months on something where they couldn't pay you $1,000. Now there's stories, and these stories get perpetuated as if it's always going to happen, and it usually never does. But people who like take $1,000, or instead of getting paid $1,000 by Google to do a logo, they get paid in stock, and then now they're billionaires or something like that. That might happen once in a lifetime, but it's probably not going to be any of our lifetimes unless we're setting up shop in Silicon Valley and specifically calling that out. But even then, your chances of hitting are very small. So I would say maybe a couple percentage points in a business, and that's if you do it over the long haul. Ryan's talking about the millionaire fast lane. That sounds like a get rich quick scam. Yeah, Ryan's saying equity investing with mentors, stay away. I agree with that. Stay away from people giving you equity in their company unless you want to be married to that person and you think they're going to make it for the long haul. Or if you're just looking for something fun to do or looking for a change of pace, I guess it's all right to do that. Okay, so I'm going to get into the written answers now. So the first answer, they've had challenges with business partners. One agency, which is a good partner, white labeled as services. The white labeling has required him to present himself as an employee of that agency. You realize it is a big mistake since it's overly complex. Well, the setup is done now. You let this partner know that they have an exclusive setup. Another challenge is that they provide competing services. That is, they want to sell their high margin services instead of trying to sell and expand your services. Yeah, it's not scalable. Not sure that you can expand the relationship. Yeah, I mean, from what I'm reading here, it sounds as if they want all the benefit of the partnership, and they're sort of just using you they're just using you for the labor. I mean, which doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but what are they bringing to the table that makes them so valuable that they can compete and work against you at the same time as they're working with you? What are they doing versus what are you doing? And can you live without them? And can they live without you? That's really what it comes down to. And actually, you can probably divide it into quadrants in that way. If they rely on you and you're the unique one, then get out of this relationship and find somebody who you can, find a partner, a business partner, an actual business partner, and work with them instead. If you rely on these people and you're not doing anything differentiated, then you might have to put up with their BS because of it. So how, where do you position yourself in that quadrant of uniqueness, and how bad do you need what they have? And I think it's okay that if you don't have what some other people have, to sort of get paid for the white labeled services, but then learn from them, like learn about why they're successful and how they do it. That's a valuable thing. If somebody's like really good at business development, but you're not good at business development, learn everything you can about business development from these people. Then learn everything you can on the job while you're getting paid by them. So basically you're getting paid to learn. Why not, right? I'd highly recommend getting paid to learn. Hopefully that helps you. No experience, think it might be best to stay away. Affiliation only. Get referrals, key agencies, nothing written in stone. In a prior business, the partner was a disaster. This business has been great. Word of caution, make sure you have similar appetites for risk, whatever that appetite is. Yep, I think having a test period is a good idea. So this one, I think Fred had mentioned this in the forums as well. But basically, a partnership is like a marriage, and it's equally messy to get out of a partnership as it is to get out of a marriage. So make sure that you are committed to that person and that you know about them. So I think a holding period, all kinds of different things you can do with a partnership. I highly recommend partnerships, but man, you have to be cautious. Like, it's great to have partners because you know what? You can't be good at everything. You can't be good at business development and creating products and marketing products and HR and finances. You can't be good at all those things. You can have enough to be dangerous and then surround yourself with good people, but you can't be great at everything. And so either you need, partners make a lot of sense. And also people work harder when they have an incentive to work harder. Like you're going to get a 40-hour employee if you don't give them an incentive to work more. Or you might just find somebody who has a crazy work ethic, but people work hard because they have incentive to. This one's just continuing on there. I think these, first time it took a couple of years, started a business, tried to hard recruit business friends. One finally joined after the business was semi-established and had 2 years of growth, and the current company is brought in when one of the partners retired. That's interesting. I think that's Fred again. I'd be interested in, when you say brought in, did you post, was it a job posting? Did you know them from something? How do they find you? How do they know about you? Found a potential business partner, met a year ago. However, process of testing out has been very passive. This sounds a lot like the partnerships that I was talking about. Like, hey, we should work together sometime, and then nothing happens. And that's like among the 50 out of, 1 out of 50 relationships that actually lead anywhere. That sounds a lot like that. Oh, Fred knew the person. They used to be competitors. Interesting. Describe your decision-making process. Day-to-day decisions left to one account manager. They review challenges weekly. She provides a daily recap of accomplishments and challenges. When work is repeatable, we create workflows in Asana. I like that. A lot of you are not quite there yet. Yeah, so I like this one. This is basically saying you have full autonomy within your area, because otherwise the project just wouldn't get done on time. So you need to let them make decisions. But then anything that affects the company, then you basically need to bring in your business partners. I like that. I think this is a good summary and a good way. This is pretty much how I think about how a business should be managed in that sense. Instinct and future planning, depending on how big the decision is. May list pros versus cons, consult with colleagues. Okay. Most minor decisions have autonomy. Bigger decisions are much more touch-based process. Big decisions. Yep. Yeah. No form. If you have a small one, no formal experience, that makes sense. Exiting's in the back of the mind. Oh, that's not free form. We've already seen those ones. Do you have any stories about agencies selling, mergings, other exits? So I did sell a former e-commerce company through a business broker. It was a good experience just to relieve the company that I had zero passion for. But I do see how an agency can be more complex to sell, having many operations documented. I would agree with that. I have a good exit story that I'll share with you in just a second that I just heard on Friday last week. Worked my ass off for 5 years to build my previous business, ended up trying to sell, but market was commoditized. Walked away with nothing but my accomplishments. Not a bad thing, but a solid lesson in planning. If you're on the call, that'd be great to hear some more color behind that. But it's good. It's refreshing to see this here. If you look at line 7, working your butt off for 5 years, and then you try to sell it. But if you become a commodity, you're going to walk away with nothing. Like, people aren't going to buy a business for 50 grand or 100 grand. It's just not even worth their time. When people want to buy a business, it's in the millions that they want to spend on something, because that's what ends up being worthwhile for them. Sold company for a lot of money. In stock of the Fortune 500 company, stock went from 44 to 250 in 18 months. I'd advise against that approach, as 5% of a lot of money is not that much. Yeah. He says this person says that they'll do either a cash deal or they'll divest the stock immediately. Yeah. So here's the story that I heard. Actually, 2 stories, and these aren't in the videos. When I was in India 2 weeks ago, I was hanging out with somebody, and they're trying to sell. He thinks that the agency is trying to sell, and so that's gonna be interesting. He was giving me some numbers around them, but I actually got exact numbers around an agency that just sold in 2016. They're an analytics agency, analytics, data science, and something else. Actually, I don't even know. Performance marketing. That's how they describe themselves, is those 3 things. They had about $10 to $15 million in revenue coming in. Now, I don't think that was all. When they have revenue, they were also selling Google's products. So some of that was actually not. It was just pass through revenue where they paid it to Google. So they were a little bit bigger than my agency. They sold for $25 million, which is pretty remarkable. It's if you look at revenue, it's about 2x revenue, and EBITDA, I'd assume that has to be more like a 10x EBITDA, because there's no way they are making 2.5. I mean, 10x EBITDA would mean that they're making $2.5 million in profit a year. I don't know many agencies that are making $2.5 million in profit a year. For whatever reason, there's not that many of them, and so that would be 10x if they're doing $2.5 million. So that's pretty remarkable. And so this company, they sold to a bigger agency. And then the other thing that was interesting about this one is they have a earnout, and I had mentioned this in the lesson, and the earnout is up to $80 million. So if they can keep on growing, all the partners still remain in the company after getting acquired, and they have an incentive to make 3 times more money if they stick around and hit earnout targets. So that's pretty remarkable if you think about it. This company, I can't mention the name because I feel like this is told to me in confidence. This is one of those buy me a beer and I'll tell you conversations. But I think I actually mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this company in a lesson. I think that I did. So you can do the math if you want to and figure it out. But they were a merger of 3 other agencies back in like 2008, 2009. And then they ended up, going from there. Yeah, Fred's saying that, yes, they merged in 2009 and they sold the company again in 2016. And I think they probably had 8 principals at the time because they were a merger of 3 other agencies. So they had to have a lot of people getting paid out. So $25 million among 8, that's still a bunch of money, right? It's $3 million a person potentially. And then the earnout could be even bigger. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. And they didn't really do anything that special, if you ask me. They just happened to like let's talk about that for a second. They were 3 agencies that merged, and they each had 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 partners. So we have 8 principals. When you have 8 principals, when you have 8 entrepreneurs working on an organization, you should be able to structure your company to have awesome processes, like Ryan's saying, and to go into the future and do R&D and to become somebody's strategic purchase. Because why wouldn't you be able to? I mean, you basically have 8 people. You don't need 8 partners to run a $15 million business. You really don't. It might sound like you do, but you don't. And so there has to be 3 or 4 people, maybe just 1 or 2 people, who all they have to think about is just, how do we make this thing more worthwhile? How do we package it up? And also, because there's a lot of people in there, they need to get the value up so they can get their cash out. Because that's an important thing here, is that if you have a lot of partners, you need to sell for a lot more money in order for people to hit their goals. Because people's goals aren't going to, anybody, if you're selling your agency and you don't, and each partner, they want to make at least $1 million. That's just how it goes. So, yeah, I'm not sure, Ryan, about the cooks in the kitchen piece. It does sound like a lot. I'm speculating. I don't know the exact workings. People could have, merged or whatever. They could have divested or something in between. Fred said it has to be a strategic purpose or strategic purchase. Yeah, it must have been, right? I'm actually not sure how strategic the purchase was, because, well, actually, I think data science is something that's strategic, but that's essentially how this had to have been. There's no way they'd earn out to $80 million. That's a ridiculous amount of money. So as I keep on finding these numbers and everything, I'm going to share them with you all, just because it's sort of fun to go through that. But that's my acquisition story that I heard recently. Finally, what makes your agency unique? You're data-driven but creatively focused. Provide small business owners with training and insights required to succeed at digital advertising. I like that. I like the mission around this. It's hard for me to actually know what services you provide or what, I don't know. I don't want to pick this apart, but it could be more specific is what I'm trying to say. Like what type of training, what type of insights anyway. So I know that people who fill this out aren't asking me to critique what they're saying. That's just my first thought of this is like, okay, this all sounds good, but what do you do? Still figuring out positioning, not much at this point, still trying to figure it out. Tossing around the question for as long as we've been around, for 12 years, embarrassing. I just don't have an answer for this. It may just be too jaded within our industry. Hey, that happens. One thing I would say if you've been in business for 12 years is think about where things intersect. So like look at where you can be in the corner of something. This is a quote from Larry Kim, who was on our podcast, and he says, position yourself at the corner of two different skills, and that's how you can really be unique. That's how you can be super unique. And so what we did at my agency was we were a Google AdWords partner, Google Analytics certified partner, which is really tough to get, and a Salesforce partner. So we were the only agency in the entire United States that had those three certifications. And so we tried to build a narrative around that. And that was, yes, some people will get Google certified because everybody does that. But how many of them will position themselves to understand how your sales process works and be accountable for that as well? We can take you through your full stack, all the way from advertising on a search engine, all the way through getting customers and analyzing who your best customers were. And people bought into that crap. Not crap, I mean, it's true, but it's more positioning than anything. Because the reality was that we had our Salesforce person who was in their silo, and then we had our AdWords people in their silo, and then analytics in another silo. And so I'm just basically saying that might be all you need to sound unique and to believe it. And it's not just for customers that you need to sound unique, because generally customers are going to buy with you because they know you and like you and they have a relationship with them, or they were introduced to you, or there's something other than how you position yourself is how you get most of your customers. But what about your employees? Do your employees believe that, and do they get excited about it? So it can be positioning for both internally and for your employees too, because I think employees feel a lot more for your company when they are part of something and when they can relate it to it, when they can say it. So I think that's a good idea, or a good way to think about it. Fred saying Google partner is really difficult to achieve, something to go after. Yeah, I mean, the Google Analytics Certified Partner Network, it's been around for 10 plus years. They actually are basically nerfing the value of it. It has never really been very valuable from a business development perspective, to be honest. Google has sent us like 10 leads and they're all terrible. But now with Google Premium, being a partner is good, but they're basically only going to send leads to premium partners, not to just general ones. So if you're not selling premium for Google, they're not going to give you any value at all. And so basically you'd actually be better off selling Google Analytics 360. I still call it premium, but it's Google Analytics 360. You'd be better off doing that and reselling for them and taking a cut than you would just being an expert practitioner. And the reason why, Fred and everybody else, is because if you're just an expert in a free product, nobody really likes to pay for the consulting services on top of a free product. It's really, they don't see value in it because they didn't pay for the product in the first place. And so we got trapped there a lot as an agency, we'd get these people thinking we were just tech support for Google. Well, then when Premium comes out, or GA 360 as it's now called, they charge 150 grand for it. It assigns a value to it, and your services are implied or automatically regarded as more valuable. And so that it's sort of interesting how that works, right? You're just magically more valuable, even though nothing's really different, nothing's changed. And so, and that just aligns with my comment, as always, is like, just go to where the revenue is. I'm not sure there's revenue in being outsourced tech support for Google on a free product. And also that the ship was probably sailed 10 years ago on that. Not 10 years ago, but 5 years ago. So that's my thoughts on it, Fred, is I wouldn't go into something that's I think Google Analytics in general is going to have a lot of challenges in the next few years because of mobile. I think that maybe looking at some of their mobile stuff and getting into the ground floor of Firebase analytics. If I were to start an agency or try to grow my agency, I would actually grow at the beginning of something, not something that's mature. And we've talked about this in the course, right? It's like if you're trying to start something in an industry that's at its maturity, the growth is pretty much squeezed out. And so if you're trying to grow your agency, you're gonna always have to, if growth is squeezed out of the industry and you're trying to grow something, all growth will come at the expense of somebody else, another agency. And so when that happens, you become competitive. And when you become very competitive in these areas, it's easy to get commoditized or treated like a commodity. And people would try to negotiate or to lower their prices for you or anything in order to, because there's not as much to go around. So people they discount their services or charge less as they get there. They take concessions just in order to get the business. It's funny, right? Because that's sort of like, so that happens at the end of a commoditized business, and it somewhat happens at the beginning when there's no real market for it at all. So you don't want to be at the beginning of a market, but you don't want to be on the down curve of it either, in my opinion. Especially if you depending on where you're at with your agency, if you're still choosing what you want to be and who you're going to be, then choose something that's going to be around and growing 5 to 10 years from now. Don't choose something that's already started to level off when it comes to growth. And so, yeah, I would say going after Google Analytics services 5 to 10 years ago was the time to do it. Firebase Analytics is where it's at, everybody. I really think you should look into Firebase. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty bare bones right now, but it's pretty awesome. The other thing I learned about in India 2 weeks ago was Yandex Metrica. Now, Yandex is the Russian search engine. I think it's it's actually a very large search, very viable search engine, really good, but it doesn't do much English language stuff. Well, they have Yandex Metrica, which is their analytics suite. It's like Google Analytics on steroids. They are pushing into the English-speaking market. The product itself has like no data caps, no data limits. It's like Google Analytics without any of the sampling or any of the negative throttling. They basically just like copy Google Analytics and then put it on to much more strong infrastructure. I was actually having beers with the guy who is the lead developer of Yandex Metrica, and he told me that he's rebuilt it from the ground up 3 times in the last 4 years because he just wants to make it better. So I thought it was pretty interesting. He said that they're on 8% of all websites, which is crazy because Google Analytics is on like 85% of websites. So Yandex Metrica is like a pretty close number. They're not close to Google, but they're like in a 2 or 3 position for biggest analytics tools, and you wouldn't have known it, and it's completely free. So Yeah, so and they have everything built into it, session replays, heat maps, everything's built into it. And this guy, I have his business card sitting right here. His name is Victor Tarnovsky. He's the head of Yandex Metrica. And that dude is awesome. He did his talk at the same conference I was speaking at. And he was just going crazy about how he's just adding features left and right. He's like, yeah, I built that feature over the weekend. I don't understand why Google's so slow. And we were talking about personally identifiable data. And we were talking about how easy it is to spam Google through the measurement protocol. And I was like, can't you just like solve this problem? He's like, yeah, it's super easy to solve. You just he's like, I don't understand why Google doesn't have authentication on the ability to push data into people's accounts. It's that easy. And he said, why don't you and then if they just made their account IDs a little bit more obscure, the problem would go away. And I said, well, are you going to do that? He's like, well, actually, yes, we can just do that. We're going to make a obscure account ID that's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's going to go away almost immediately. And he's like, I think I'm going to implement it this weekend. So I know that you guys are more interested in agency stuff, but I think that this is helpful in general just to see where people are innovating. Like I go to conferences and I get inspired by innovation. I get inspired by these conversations that I have with people who are passionate about what they do and talking about these things, and just like answering questions that never get answered ever. Like I could do so many things to try to get in touch with this guy at Yandex and ask him all these questions, and I would get no answer at all, I bet. But then I just happened to be there talking to him, and I got that. So it was sort of cool to see these things, and also that I'm personally not crazy for saying that Google's the only one who can solve their spam problem with Google Analytics. But I think that the spam problem in Google Analytics is actually like it's potentially going to get people to look for an alternative. And I think that Yandex could be an alternative. I'm not sure how much I trust my data with them, but they seemed pretty, like these people seemed like they didn't really care about your data. They just cared about making cool stuff. A lot of adult websites use Yandex Metrica, they said, in the United States. They're really the only customers they have in the US are adult websites that don't want to be tracked by Google. So take with that what you will. YANDEX. There you go. Ryan put it in there for you. I'll try to get it. I'll see what I can do about Victor's presentation, Fred. But Victor Tarnovsky, Yandex Metrica, just try to Google search for him. They didn't videotape the ones at Super Week that I was at 2 weeks ago. Okay, we're good. These are the end of the free-form answers. So start getting your other questions in here if you want to have them. No, Ryan, there's no reason at all to be scared about Russians stealing your data, right? That was sarcasm. Uniquely qualified to serve every industry and every company. Just kidding. We have a really good approach to creating product catalogs for manufacturers, particularly when they have a large distributor channel, every purpose content across multiple channels. I think that's cool. A good way to differentiate. In addition to the services I offer, I focus a lot on helping businesses properly build up their sales funnel and tell a great story. A lot of agencies, from what I see, just plug away without questioning if the client has the right funnel or not. I also think storytelling is important because humans love a good story, and that can often be deciding factor as a sale as opposed to cost or features. So I like this. I wonder how well it scales to offer a customized service and building out their funnel. And also, you just need to make sure you charge for it. I think that's a problem that I see people run into, is they don't charge for these additional services, and so they think the money is great, but then they look at how much time they have to write off getting somebody on board. That's the hard part about this, right? So it's logical, and it's good for the client to offer them a lot of extra services, but it's not great for profitability or for your own personal stress. Now, if you figured out the way to do both, then either you are amazing, or you're stressed out, or you have just great margins. Like if you can get $500 an hour, then this makes sense, right? If you can charge $500 an hour and only have to work half the time, but then the rest of the time is doing strategy, that can really work out for you. Okay, so what other questions do we have? Does everybody have that they want to ask while we're on this call? I know that we're an hour and a half into it, but we started about an hour late, nearly an hour late. So let's just hear your questions. I'm going to take a look in the chat window. I don't see anything in there that's recent. I don't think I missed anything. So if I did miss your question, bump it up to the top. Otherwise, I'll just look for what you have to say. Okay, I don't see any questions coming in, so I'm gonna stick around for a little bit, but it sounds like you all are focused elsewhere. So hopefully, okay. Alvaro, good question. Why do I hate the names Jefflytics and 3Deep? So let's start with 3Deep because that was the first one that came around. So when I'm from Minnesota, and when I was in high school, there was 3 wide receivers for the Minnesota Vikings: Jake Reed, Chris Carter, Randy Moss. And if you went to Burger King and you bought a Happy Meal or whatever they call them, a value meal, you'd get a poster called 3Deep, and it was a picture of those 3 wide receivers, deep wide receivers, whatever you want to call it. And so when I heard the name of the company, I just thought it was hilarious that it was named after a poster from Burger King that every kid had. Every single person had this poster. And so, yeah, so that was, honestly, that was just funny to me that it was that name. And then if you Google 3Deep, before I helped with SEO on Urban Dictionary, the description is not very flattering. It's yeah, you know what Urban Dictionary does. So, and so the other one is people would say, like, make fun of it and put a sexual connotation on it, much like Urban Dictionary. So I get a lot of like weird sexual comments about my company name, which nobody really needs that in a business setting, no matter how funny it is to all of you, whatever. Nobody needs that, right? You just don't. And so there was just all these things adding up, and I was like, this is just, you know, a dumb name. Now, the intention of 3Deep was most companies don't do anything. They just only look at the surface when it comes to your marketing data and the results. We go 3 levels deep to give you the answer that you're looking for. So it actually makes a lot of sense. We go 3 levels deep. I actually like that. It's differentiating. It's a methodology. It's something that makes you unique because everybody else sucks. But you don't always have time to explain that. And actually, when you're at networking events and you say it and people have a few drinks in them, I just got embarrassed. Now I'm over it. I hit them back, you know, not literally, but like I snark them back if they snark me first. So that's what I ended up doing there. Now, Jefflytics, funny thing is I didn't have a blog or anything. I was only blogging under the 3Deep name. People didn't even know who I was when I was there because I did everything as 3Deep because I was just building that brand up. And so I decided that I wanted people to know who I was because I wanted to get speaking gigs. And this is going to dovetail nicely into what Brett's asking. I'll get to that in a second. But I wanted speaking gigs, and nobody knew who Jeff Sauer was. They only knew who 3Deep was because I never put my name out there. And I was like, well, I better write as Jeff in order to get it going. So I just chose any name at all with my name in it, so that people would know that I was the person who was considered for speaking gigs. Because frankly, I applied for speaking gigs. I applied for every 5 that I applied to, I'd get accepted into 1. And they were like, I'd only get accepted into local ones with local audiences of like 5 people. and then even that didn't always happen. And so every time I try to do something at a national level or even like a mid-level, I would get rejected. And so I thought that the only way I was going to get speaking gigs was if I had my name out there. And that's partially true. I mean, it helped. It turns out that the way to get speaking gigs, frankly, is to get in good with the organizers of the conference. That's the number 1 rule. And just like, just like I was talking about how I like going to conferences because I have these hallway conversations and I have accessibility unlike anything else. The accessibility at conferences with organizers is great. You can, if you're nice to them and they like you, they just want to get people, they just want to get their job done, which is to have people speaking and people showing up to the conference. And so if you get in good with them, they'll just have you go to all their conferences. And so that's why I was in India, because the organizer of Super Week, him and I get along well, and I've done 3 of his conferences now. I actually just wrote the foreword for their Hungry conference just the other day. I just learned, and Fred's going to like this one. Fred, I think I might finally meet you in Estonia. I'm going to go to Estonia and do a conference in June because I met the person who runs the conference last year. And so this is, like I said, Brett, this is dovetailing into things for you. What ended up happening was I got rejected a lot when I was an anonymous nobody on speaking gigs. I'd fill out these forms that say, give us your pitch. And I'd get rejected every single time. Eventually I started to say, that's stupid to do that, right? It's not working for me. And so I started talking to people who were successful and got a lot of speaking gigs. And they basically said, well, are you a woman? Are you talking about something unique? How are you different? Just like even on this screen right now, like what makes you unique? And I actually still didn't even know. I had never defined that. I only got speaking gigs in the past because I was there, I guess. And so eventually I just started to define more around what makes me unique and trying to get out there. But even that, I just needed some experience. And so eventually I just applied to things and I met people, and then that led to more and more things. That's the only way to put it, is that get into one, get in good with the organizers, and then find the next one and just keep on finding them. That's how it's happened for me. It's basically you do good in one area and you get reputation. You get a reputation and you get more of them. Now, speaking itself, I mean, it's just reps. It's all 100% reps, repetition, doing things over and over again, and just getting good at it, just getting comfortable with speaking. Best article I've found on that one is by Ollie Gardner. It's called "It's All Right to Puke When You Speak in Public," I believe. Now, Ryan's like the fastest person in the world at searching, so I bet you he'll find this. I think it's a Medium post. But he basically said, Ollie Gardner just watched a bunch of TED Talks and then became one of the best speakers I've ever seen. He's great. And so maybe take a look at that one and just sort of see his approach to speaking. So there's 2 parts of it. One is you have to be a good speaker, but no matter how good of a speaker you are, you have to get gigs. And the only way you can get gigs is if you are unique or if you differentiate, whatever that ends up being. Yep. Ryan on the spot. That's awesome. You must have just been searching it right when I was in there. Okay. So I think that, Brett, answers your question, but if not, it's a slow build. It's all about repetition and getting good with the organizers and put yourself out there. I'm telling you that having Jeffalytics.com was much better for speaking gigs than having just 3D 3deep.com. Or actually, we don't even own 3deep.com, 3deepmarketing.com. Now, that's another funny story if you want to stick around. I tried to buy 3deep.com and the number 3deep.com, and I was lowballing these people because I thought that there was no competition for the domain name. And in my lowballing, I ended up costing us the domain name, and now it would be like $100,000 to buy it. Yeah, Ryan said he spoke at a couple meetups. That's a good way to go. I like meetup.com to get people into a setting. Like you can get people in a room. I did not. I talked to nonprofits. I talked to MN. I talked at MN Search, which is an organization I helped found. I don't know. Just every little thing. I spoke at an independent wedding association. I've spoken at so many things in the Twin Cities area. Just whatever people would ask me to talk about, and it was always almost always Google Analytics or advertising. But I just said yes to everything, and eventually it kept on going. But you need some discovery method, and I think the discovery method is probably search, like speaker, your topic, your local area, and then putting your slides on SlideShare every time you do something. If you search for Google Analytics on SlideShare, I think 3 of my presentations are on the first page. Like it's just your back catalog. You just keep on doing things and you just keep on plugging away. But again, like we talked about podcasting earlier, we're talking about speaking now. Just choose to commit to like 1 or 2 of these, and just choose that you're going to be just awesome at it, and you're going to get good at it, and you're going to have much better results than doing speaking once and then not touching it again until a year from now. Like there's a difference between the people who speak a lot and those who don't, and you can tell. And it's all repetition and just getting comfortable out there. Ryan said that on Meetup, people stepped down, so they asked if you want to take over. Should you take over somebody else's Meetup group? I don't know. It depends on the reputation, depends on attendance, it depends on strategic value for you. I think that worst case scenario, you just picked up a new job that sucks and you don't want to do it and waste your time. Best case scenario, you just got a bunch of leads and fish in a barrel. So I don't know if you'd have to assess that group, which bucket they fall into. I think you can overdo it with community and speaking and stuff like that. You really have to try to tie it back to revenue, but it's never like a short-term revenue tie. It's always long-term. And so what I mean by that is if I do a speaking gig today, or like the one that I did in India, that may never lead to business. I might never get a return on my flight there. Now, sometimes people pay for your flights. A lot of times I get people to pay for flights. This time I did it as a favor. So I paid for my own flight. They pay for the hotel and for all the food and everything. Anyway, I may never see a return on that, or it could turn into $100,000 in business. And actually, I could get $100,000 in business from it 3 years from now, when India decides that they want to start taking online courses. I might be the one that's positioned there now because there's 100 or 200 people in the room watching me. And so I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to the ROI on that speech, because it's zero until it's not. And all I know is that the more I do this, the more things come to me. And so I am in a position where I don't have to assign an ROI to everything. I just know that I'm better off having chosen this than not doing it. And it's not just like a small factor of being better off, it's significantly better off. The thing about speaking in meetups and local associations is that you have a reason to reach out to people. Like I was just able to reach out to several people, again, above my weight class. And I get responses because I can just say, hey, I met you at a meetup, or I met you when you came and spoke at our thing in Minneapolis, and I ordered you tater tots. Like, there's all kinds of different things you can do to reach out to people when you have these relationships. So putting yourself in a position where you can have those, when you can rub elbows and bump into them, I think is really good. Now, you can do that with Twitter, but I think that if people have their guard up a lot more to a random person on Twitter, once you've met somebody physically, the attraction, if you will, or like the relationship, it's much, much better. Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in, and it's very late here where I'm located. And so if there's no more questions, I think we're going to end this call. And yes, Fred, it's the Conversion XL conference over in Estonia that I'm going to. All right, well, thanks everybody. Hopefully you found this useful and that you are okay, or at least understanding of my little technical snafu to start this out. Sorry about that. That's the last thing I want to do, but hopefully we're through it again. So thanks everybody.